Hello everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Crosstalks. Crosstalks is a podcast where academic insights meet real-world impact. The Crosstalk podcast, it aims to build a community exploring the multidimensional nature of responsible internationalization. This again is part of a larger research project funded by the Swedish Foundation for International Cooperation and Research in Higher Education. The first episode of Crosstalks, our podcast series, on April 28th, focused on discussing the concept of responsible internationalization. That discussion called for moving beyond simplistic risk management toward a strategic, opportunity-aware approach to international collaboration. As such, the conversation centered on how geopolitical shifts have made cross-border academic collaboration more complex, calling for a more nuanced strategic approach. Today's session explores how responsible internationalization is becoming a strategic imperative. A strategic imperative for universities and a critical lever for Sweden's global competitiveness. We will listen to insights from leading experts, including Patrik Tingvall, Robin Tegland, and also myself, as we explore how cross-border partnerships can support both academic excellence and national competitiveness. This directly relates to some of the most pressing questions of the intersection of research, education, and innovation policy. As such, we will begin by unpacking Sweden's competitiveness and how it is evolving. That will include issues like what do you mean by competitiveness? What does Sweden's current position look like in this context? We will then connect these questions to our main theme. What does responsible internationalization mean in practice? And how can it balance openness with research security, but also ethical integrity? Questions like, how can global academic collaboration elevate research quality, attract talent, and contribute to cutting-edge innovation? And to get this discussion started, I would like first to invite Professor Patrik Tingvall to the stage. Please, Patrik. This is a person that has plenty of interesting observations to share. Not yet, my friend.
Not yet.
Patrik, as a matter of fact, on my way here this morning, I was reminded of one of many adventures we have done together over the years. This particular memory took me back in time to when you, I think, first visited me in China. I think we went to Shanghai.
Don't say too much. Be careful what you're saying.
We had two colleagues of ours online from Stockholm. They were joining us online, and we were discussing the direction in which China was heading by that time, among many other things, of course. We'll leave that for later. What we have witnessed since then is an almost indescribable expansion and growth, driven in large by the very topics we'll be talking about today. Universities that prioritize international collaboration and research quality, and companies that work closely with universities on research and knowledge development. Today, some 20 years later, several Chinese universities are ranked in the global top 10, and Chinese knowledge-intensive companies compete on a global scale, not the least so with Sweden. The level of entrepreneurship and innovative capacity is extraordinary in China today. That is something that Professor Robin Tegland will speak more about shortly. I have had the privilege of observing the development firsthand over many years in China, and it naturally raises a number of important questions, which we have been discussing for years too. Do we have an answer to that, by the way?
Absolutely.
For example, how should Swedish universities and companies respond to this development, not only in China, but globally? What are we doing well, and where do we fall short? And by that, Patrick, please speak. You love to speak, you like to speak, you're enjoyable to listen to.
Yes, thank you. I don't know how to answer this kind invitation and all the nice words that you've been saying. But before we really start, I would like to remember when we started a research center at the Stockholm School of Economics some 20 years ago, I was questioned by my colleagues saying, oh, you know, Patrick, a China center, who's interested in that? China is so small in the world global economy, and the trade with China is so small. So
someone gave us 25 million.
Yeah, someone gave us a little. But times has been changing, and if you don't mind, what I would like to start with is it's like a teaser for an upcoming research project we have within this research project. And it's about service sector competitiveness. Because things have changed so much during the last 20 years, and we are kind of proud of the Swedish service sector. And when we look at it, at a first glance, it looks tremendous good. When we look at the data and look at Swedish service exports, 3 types of services totally dominates Swedish service exports, and that's property rights, human capital intensive, knowledge intensive, ICT, super knowledge intensive, and something called other business services. And what's that? You don't know. Other business services is a category that most R&D is in that category.
Okay.
And these 3 categories is like 2/3 of Swedish service exports. So Swedish service export looks very heavily biased toward knowledge-intensive sectors, and that's good, right?
That's the direction we want to be heading,
Yeah,
right?
we would like to see that. We're kind of proud of that. And what many people don't know is that if you look at Swedish exports supports about 1.5 million jobs. And the majority of those jobs are actually supported by services. So service export is super important for employment in Sweden. So that's what we know, and it's looked pretty good. But when we look at data, closely at the data, and we look at different service categories, what has happened with our competitiveness during the last 10 years, the trend is quite clear. We are losing competitiveness, especially in those knowledge-intensive services.
And that is, Robin, what we discussed just a few minutes ago, something that you have been observing as well in your research and your whereabouts.
Yes. And what we don't know really is why is that so? And that's the thing we want to do research on. And it's like 2 main ways to explain this. Either we lose competitiveness because of we are not investing in the resources needed for these services. It's a lack of investment. But it could also be that because this is human, it's knowledge intensive. And we know that when you are operating knowledge intensive activities, you need to cooperate with the best actors around the globe to stay competitive. And it might be that we are losing the top-notch contacts. And why can I say this? We don't know, But I mean, if you look at Sweden, and we have now a disintegration between US and China, and we have technology blockade from the US to China, and Sweden is an economy where we have a lot of trade with the US and a lot of high-tech work together with the US, but also with the Chinese. And we are stuck in between. And it complicates life in Sweden a lot. So what we would like to have a closer look at these links. How have they evolved over time? And can this knowledge spill overs that we boring economists are talking about? Can we see that this is the answer to the reduced competitiveness, or is it just that we're not investing much enough?
Who told you economists are boring?
Yeah, we are so boring.
So there is obviously a link starting from investment. You have capital in terms of finance, but also human capital. And that link, we need to explore that more, and in particular, so the role of universities. Does international collaboration, is that a factor in that relates later on to the level of investments, to competence building? What are the links in between? Or maybe do we even need international collaboration? And what type of international collaboration does a small country like Sweden need with good universities? So,
an excellent question.
yes.
And I think you prolonged this podcast to about 24 hours.
Okay. Do you have time, Robin? Fantastic.
But I think we can try to find our way to that kind of question and look at it bit by bit. And we can start by looking at the universities, at the researchers, and me as a professor and you as a professor. How do we work today? And this kind of a, stylized fact that as a professor in Sweden or international, you spend like 20% of your time applying for research money, research fund, administration of that. And this sense, you need to find funding. That's important. Secondly, what we know is that when we look at research publications from Sweden, at the year, for the last 10, 15 years, about 2,000 to 2,500 articles per year has been co-authored with Chinese researchers, and the Chinese part is increasing. And Swedish researchers are also doing collaboration with the US. And US, if we have 2,500 research publications with the Chinese, we have about 6,000 yearly publications with the US. And 10,000 yearly publication with the rest of the EU. And if you look at the really, really high-ranked journal articles, the top 5 journals in different topics, you find that only 1 of 4 or 1 of 5 articles is solely authored by Swedish researchers. The top articles, you find international collaboration. And it's not that strange. We are a small country. We need to find the right human capital to integrate in the project, and we cannot find it in Sweden, so we are heavily dependent on international collaboration, right?
And I think that is a good starting point for where the discussion is heading. So, Patrick, why don't you and I go and have a talk to this fantastic, talented co-worker of ours? Okay?
Yes.
Bring your notes, you know what to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Robin.
Yes.
What do you have to say to your defense?
My defense? I don't think I need to defend anything, actually. No, it's been. I think it's a fascinating topic. Where to start? You've touched on many different things. For me, I think one of the most important things is really talking about collaboration. And when we talk about collaboration, that we define it on different levels. On the one hand, you talk about very formal collaboration, collaborating, publishing together with other authors. This is one type of collaboration. But I think if we're talking about competitiveness, and also I think we need to bring into the picture of what we're talking about is a sustainable future, then we need to look beyond just publications and speak about impact. And there, I think you're also discussing working with industry and so on. So yes, if we think about the different levels of collaboration, we have formal publications, formal collaborations with industry. I think what also is so important in this is how do we informally networking as well, because that is where so much knowledge is shared and new knowledge is created. By the time something comes out in a publication, it might actually be old knowledge in some journals because it time, So I think what's important there is being very much in the core networks and guiding the field. And how do we, as researchers and as universities, are we embedding ourselves in the informal networks where the new knowledge, the new ideas are being developed? And so I think that's something that, yes, we have the funding and so on, but how do we encourage that type of collaboration as well? So I'm not sure where, I can keep on going on many topics, but I just like to bring that up because I think it is so important. We tend to focus on publications and citations, but really we need to look much more beyond that into, yes, collaborations of different levels, and impact.
Yeah. First, I want to notice that this is totally unscripted.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what you are
Exactly.
saying exactly leads to the research project that we are just about to start now, because we need to find collaboration and the high impact collaboration.
Yep.
And what we are looking into now is like the 20% of the time where we spend, researching for research funds. What we are trying to see now, having thousands of applications, research applications, and we know if this was granted or not. And we can see the quality, the citation index of the researchers, the research group, everything. And we can see if there's for some international collaboration in this package. And if so, the question is, if you have international collaboration, does it increase your probability of being granted? And even more so, is it some countries or some design, some composition of the research team that the grant givers really enjoy to see? So and nobody has touched on this, so we are.
I'd like to ask the question where we're throwing around the term international collaboration. I think do you mean that you're working with an individual at a university that's international, or is it someone, because I can be working with a Chinese person here in Sweden at a Swedish university. So what is international collaboration? I think that's something that we also need to tease apart.
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, I thought about this earlier this week and made a short post about it. Introducing my former research assistant at Peking University. That's one example of a China international collaboration that has been very productive. Of course, then Chalmers and Gothenburg University, Swedish universities and Chinese universities, US universities, they all have institutionalized collaborations, which is slightly different, right? And what you mentioned earlier, how we reach impact is the most important. And I'm not sure if there is a good existing model that explains the value of both institutional and semi-individual and individual collaborations, and where lies the responsibility or the responsible part of it in terms of security actions, integrity, and you're not Swedish.
I'm not Swedish, no. Oh, I am Swedish. I'm
You
a
are?
Swedish citizen now. I'm both U.S. citizen and Swedish citizen.
What about your Norwegian?
No, just
that.
love of Norway and Norwegians. That's all.
Norway
Yes.
is my favorite country in the world. But okay, so.
But I can add, maybe it's not an answer to your question, what is foreign, but you say different kinds of international collaboration, because what we are looking at is both at the institutional level, grants that are applied by the university, the principal of the university stands behind this grant, and that's one type of collaboration, and then we can see which foreign university and so on. And the other is at the researcher level, at the level of the researcher, we can see. But if there's a foreign researcher in Sweden that goes you know,
Yes, that's another.
we cannot
Yes.
really see that.
Okay,
I
interesting.
mean, there are a lot of
Yeah.
micro
Yeah.
international
Yep.
collaborations
Uh,
within the larger
No, I
sphere.
mean just if I think about myself, when I came to Chalmers in 2018, I was here, brought here with one of the purpose of actually hiring PhD students, and that was one thing I really wanted to do was increase our international collaboration. But instead of like reaching out to others, I hired PhD students where I had a plan to have from different continents. So I brought in Adrian from Germany, Ida from Ghana, Maria from Russia, and then I have two more, Christina from Sweden, and Xingwei from China. So I think it's also about we as researchers being very active in how we think about internationalization. So at the institutional level, the top down, but how do we as researchers from a bottom up also enable this international collaboration? And I think there should be, in a way, some type of there's not many guidelines around how to think around that, nor I would say the incentive system to do so. That could also be improved.
Yeah, you know that there are of course protocols and routines of how to make sure that an international project or it's kind of it's ethical integrity, security issues if that is the case. But in terms of kind of collaborations that we speak about, I mean, what are the guidelines? And as the researchers, we're interested in impact, quality, publications, developing ourselves and the ideas we work with. And sometimes there is a contradiction. I mean, if you have setting up a big laboratory, sensitive technical issues, on the edge engineering stuff, there might be a whole set of different questions involved when it comes to the pure security part of it, which sometimes is less obvious when you discuss, entrepreneurship or growth studies or the studies that we're into now, competitiveness, and how to navigate that landscape for us working in this environment. That's not always easy. But I'm just going back to the way you recruited PhD students, because it leads to the question, how do we attract, talents to Swedish universities from around the globe? Do we need to be a top 10 university globally to attract these talents? Or what made them come to you?
Yeah, what made them come to me? Well, that's a good. You'll have to ask them. But I think what brought them to Chalmers is Chalmers being in Gothenburg and really in the heart of Sweden's industry, which is one of the reasons why I moved here to Chalmers from Stockholm School of Economics, where, yes, I was previously working with kind of the soft financial sector and wanted to work much more with manufacturing. So I think it is very much about Sweden and its industry, and you're speaking about competitiveness, that is so attractive. And the closeness between academia and industry, the collaboration that we have also. So it's not just one factor or the other. I think it is, many in a mix, where you're speaking about collaboration on many different levels that really does attract individuals to Sweden.
Can complicate it.
Yeah.
You can make it complicated.
Yeah, I can
You have a
complicate.
tendency for doing that.
Yeah.
That's good. That makes the discussion more
But
interesting.
I mean, there's two layers of this. First, universities and research teams want to climb the ladder and become more high-ranked. And universities, by collaborating with other high-ranked universities, you can increase your ranking, and then you can collaborate with even more high-ranked universities. So it's a tug of war of climbing the ladder. And we need this international collaboration for this. And the same goes for research teams, of course. If I can do research with a Nobel laureate, so I mean, Nobel Prize winner, that's a super advantage for me. But I must climb the ladder to be able to attract that person. That's one part of the side of the coin. And the other coin is the security's responsibility. Because I think that the researcher, and they have one view of where security begins and where security ends. And the security agencies, they have one view of this. And an economist might have a third view, and a law person may have another view. But and in these days, these security issues has become, like a wedge, making this collaboration much more difficult. And for a small economy like Sweden, and we are so dependent on collaboration, it's more devastating for Sweden, I think, than it's for the large economies that have so much knowledge domestically.
Yeah, just to give an example, from what I understand, it's becoming much more difficult to have industrial PhDs. Yeah, if these people are citizens of countries which, yes, might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This actually brings us into a very interesting topic, and that's the university industry nexus. you
Yes.
know, where industrial PhDs is a kind of key component in how we supply businesses with knowledge, and how to deal with that in this increasingly volatile, unstable political environment.
I think that has so much to do with risk. I mean, what I fear is that people think it's easier to say no and not take the risk. And then what happens? I mean, how do we encourage people to actually, take that risk by continuing on with industrial PhDs?
Absolutely, and that leads me to a debate we had a year ago with a U.S. professor from MIT, actually, a lady, and she said, we have to identify in moments where we say yes, maybe, or no.
Yeah.
But we cannot just, by definition, shout no
Yes.
immediately when we speak about industrial PhDs or international collaboration, even in sensitive fields. We have to find a sensible way to evaluate, and so there is a perhaps or maybe part of collaboration. Some areas we need to say no. The question again is, who is going to make that decision? Is it the dean, or is it the individual researcher, the funding agency?
I guess that would depend. I think it really depends on the instance. Is it more of the informal collaboration all the way up to some type of grant that you're applying for, and the nature of the grant, as you were saying earlier, if you're in some lab, maybe very high-tech lab, in something that is very security sensitive, or is it something related to more social sciences where maybe not so? And then how can you build? So it becomes a very a jungle. And as a researcher, I think we don't really understand the importance of thinking around this. There's not enough awareness at the researcher level yet of thinking about these issues. So I think we need to.
Should researchers think about it? I mean, there is a discussion, debate among some researchers that quality should be the only focus of the researcher, not political issues, not global politics, shift in geopolitical environment. We should only focus on the quality in what we are doing. Is there no?
But I think when it comes especially to like industrial PhD that goes into a program that they have a specific topic they want to be highly specialized on. And what many people don't know is that if you look at the Swedish labor and many Western countries' labor markets, when firms try to hire people, they are happy if they're good enough just to be employed to learn the job tasks when they're hired. So it's a huge mismatch. About 40% of employees are mismatched according to many traditional standards of mismatch. And we would notice that the Swedish competitiveness in many high, advanced sectors are going down.
Yeah.
And if you look way back, could be that we don't have the right, students, the PhD, the labor is not optimized for these jobs. And that's when we need this kind of close collaboration between universities and the business society to bridge that gap. And so for Swedish competitiveness, I think it's
But that I think
super
we can
important.
get into a whole issue of universities and how they're structured. And do we need a 5-year degree program, for example, where, how applied is it what they're learning? Is it too theoretical? And then they get to the workplace and then, whoa, wait a minute, now I have to actually apply. But much of what I've learned already is maybe out of date, or I don't really know how to, or I don't have the soft skills to actually work with this. So I think what we really need to do even more is also to think about, the whole universities and how are we supplying the labor market as well with the labor that's required, and do we need to think differently? I just have to throw out a pitch. I'm sitting on the board of Skellefteå Universities Alliance, which is from the government side as a way of creating a test bed for new forms of higher education.
Interesting.
Where we really are focusing very much the starting point is a collaboration between industry, society, and university. We start there and then think, how can we tailor a program around those needs, as opposed to starting with a program, a diploma program, and then thinking, okay, what do we need to fill that? So I think this is
That's my experience from Asia, not only China, but from Asia, generally speaking, that the universities have been quite good at identifying this area of problems and taking action to it, and on a trial and error basis. And in most cases, it has been quite good, as a matter of fact. So maybe it's time for Sweden in this case to look outwards and see what has been a successful case.
we need to be much better at looking out.
Exactly,
I
and
agree.
learn from that.
Yes.
But if you look back in time, especially if you took a PhD like 30, 40 years ago, if you finish a PhD, your future was at the institution, at the university. It was like an internal system.
Yeah.
But nowadays we have so many PhD that goes outside the university, but still the PhD studies, they are designed for you to stay within the university. So maybe we have us.
I think on all levels we need to rethink. Well, we have this diploma inflation.
Exactly.
So we could take a step back and thinking maybe we should have more applied.
But is this all an issue for universities, or is the problem the same? I mean, at the enterprise level, do they really see the need and the solutions? I mean, we obviously from the data we have noticed that there is a decline in competitiveness globally. Do we
I'm
recognize
just wondering,
that?
we keep talking about a decline. I like the statement by Federer, the tennis player, where he said, you have to continuously think about what can I do better, what can I do better, how do I get better? Because if you don't, then you end up standing still while the others are getting better. And I think that's kind of how I see Sweden, that we've been resting on our laurels. It's not that we haven't been doing anything different. We just keep doing what we've been doing, but the others are.
Robin, I'm so happy you mentioned this. And in the fall of 2021, me and then head of research at the Entrepreneurship Forum wrote an article about exactly about this. That we perhaps do not feel the pressure for change because we tell ourselves that we are already the best. And because of that, we will stay the best for the next decade and the decade after that.
The sense of urgency.
While, again, Asia, to a large extent, is moving extremely quickly.
But I think it's the sense of urgency, but I think also it has to do with engineering culture that we have. Sure. Where if I think about, engineers, you build a great product and it will sell. So we're not so good at like selling in the same, or even selling Sweden, I think. So there's something there about, this creating awareness around what you're doing. So I would agree. It's kind of this sense of urgency combined with where we're doing great, and if we do really well, then people will come and buy. So I think there is something. It's that kind of combination there.
Yeah,
that we need
maybe
to
we are
work on.
What do you say about that, Patrick?
I would like to go back to one step to make universities fit for the businesses. And one way to look at this is this private-public partnerships that are going on around the world, and not also in Sweden. And we have many successful such, and we have also less successful public-private partnerships. Is a difficult word.
PPP.
PPP.
It's easier.
Yeah, way easier. And I mean, Lindholmen here at the Chalmers, actually asked ChatGPT, do you have some example of some successful PPPs? And so this is neutral, it's not me. And the ChatGPT came up with Lindholmen at Gothenburg. That's one example.
That's fantastic. Listen to that.
Yeah. And there were some other examples that was less successful. But it seems when it seems like the quality of the university has to be top notch to really produce good public-private partnerships. There were some, and they must take the responsibility from the university side. If the universities go along, but they don't really engage in it, and maybe hands over some responsibility to some private company and for do it, it's very often a disaster. But this kind of working together, much can be said about PPPs, but it's one way to merge the needs of the universities and the businesses together.
But you have to have leadership that motivates and incentivizes and rewards that behavior. And I think we're still not really there in many universities about,
To some extent, Patrick, what we did in 2007 with the donation from Ericsson, I mean, we started out actually with leaders from Ericsson who were open-minded. They saw the pressure for change, and they wanted to try something, and they gave us the opportunity to do that. And I must say we were quite successful in the first years in our collaboration with the Swedish Business Society, trying to understand what was going on outside of Sweden and how that would impact a company like Ericsson. And hopefully they learned something from that. But that's just a micro case, micro evidence. And but I agree to what you're saying. We need to start from there and make businesses and universities to take the leadership.
What gets measured gets done. And I feel as an academic that within the system that the reward system is still on the publications with collaborations with other academics and not on this university industry collaboration to the same degree. So,
but we might have one golden opportunity that we might not have utilized enough in Sweden. I mean, it's almost free. It's not totally free of charge for foreigners, but it's very cheap to study in Sweden and to make them stay in Sweden. And there's something happening in the US right now, and they are losing a lot of students, international PhD students and other students. And faculty members. And if we can absorb that, it's like, we can, if we are acting smart now, we can.
We had a kind of discussion about that in April. And of course, there are many talented students and PhDs, postdocs, whatever we can attract. But there are a few issues to that. One issue, of course, is that we have to be attractive enough so they would like to come and stay and stay after. But also, at the same time, I mean, the US universities are good. I mean, they are the best we have in the world, right? Now it's a bit turbulent. But what about the strategy of starting to collaborate more with US universities? Building up strong relationships. Excuse me. To build on for the long run. Kind of a mix. Not just expect that everyone would flee across the Atlantic Ocean to Sweden. But
I definitely agree. I mean, there's I think
start to do something productive with the researchers that are now still based in the U.S. and
I think we need to do much more from that regard. Now is an opportunity. If we pull back, then you'll see only increased polarization. Now is the time to actually build those bridges. I mean, there's a professor from Chalmers who's moving to Texas. She got a position there, and so she's going there now to work. So I think this is when we really need to build those bridges and discuss and promote our way of thinking around research.
And this is again going back to Asia, a little bit of how we started out in Asia in the late 1980s, 1990s. By building collaborations when they needed it for us to benefit from, right? And U.S. universities will not go away; they will stay top notch, world competitive. But times are a bit turbulent, so perhaps we should do even more on that side to make ourselves stronger in the long run.
And actually, there was a study from what's Svenskt Näringsliv, the Swedish whatever it's called in
Yeah, I
English,
don't know.
that show that this is not students, but there's the experts, immigration of experts, and how it benefited Swedish companies. And what we can show in that paper was that Sweden, if you look at the rankings of how attractive countries are, attractiveness lists, we are almost in all lists, we're on the top 5 countries. We are offering clean air, stable environment, child care, and so on. So we have a number of good selling points that we maybe could use a little bit more. But as you were indicating, Christer, we do not have Harvard. But we might have something that can attract some research collaboration. For example, in economics, like we are in, we have tremendous good micro level data, and you want this access to that when collaborate. So in some, we need to use our small edges that we have to build these bridges. And Sweden is actually, in many respects, an attractive country.
Sure.
So we have something to build on.
So again, going back to the discussion about universities, the need to collaborate internationally, globally, at the individual as well as institutional level. Is that? Do we believe that there is a link to the competitiveness of the Swedish companies that we could build on or elaborate on, develop further, or is it? What should we do?
Oh, I definitely think so. I mean, we definitely have to continue the international collaboration because that's how we can push fields forward. But I think we need to be maybe better at interdisciplinary collaboration, where the true innovations really can be made. So I think that's more difficult to do, to promote that. I mean, I'm running a project that's funded by Vinnova under Production 2030, where generally speaking, Vinnova projects are only Swedish partners get funded, but we are working together with Portugal companies and universities there, as well as Swedish university and companies and RISE, Research Institutes of Sweden. And the whole idea is to create a blue circular economy model, which is challenging our traditional forms of globalized production by creating local circular production systems. And we could not do this alone here in Sweden. We couldn't do it alone in Portugal, but we together can bring the necessary resources to the table so that we can put them all in this ecosystem. But that's where, for example, it is difficult to find funding for these types of projects, I find. So luckily,
is that because the funding agencies and universities are too traditional in their thinking, or is it we as researchers are too traditional?
Well, it's probably a mix. I find that luckily I have been on the ground so long in Portugal that I have very good relationships there, and so we were able to bring these people into the project working for free, contributing their time and resources to the project. So just kind of say, look, Vinnova, this is what we would like to do,
and this is fantastic, and we've been part of various projects like that. However, if you were to leave that project and we were to leave other projects, they would disappear, they would stop. How do we make this as a continuous, a part of the continuous life at universities?
No, but that might be you mean, I can see the projects might, but you get the spin-off effects. But I think it is about promoting, yes, that type, and this gets back to the incentive system. Are you rewarded at all in your academic performance reviews on the quality or international dimension of your collaborations? Not so much that I've seen. Yes, to move up, you're expected to be a leader in your field internationally, but this interdisciplinary aspect and also international collaboration, I think, is not well rewarded. I think another dimension that is difficult is, for example, the EU projects are so admin heavy. That you'd rather skip it than have to. I mean, we tried to do a Smart Eureka project, and the amount of work that went into that, and then at the end we didn't even get the label. So right now, we just submitted a proposal to Nordforsk last week, where it's a professor in Denmark, and it's a professor in Finland, and it's a project around antagonistic threats. And so we're actually looking at the idea is how can we enable collective resilience in industrial communities that surround critical raw mineral sites, whether they're processing, mining, or recycling. And this is with Nordforsk, which very much is encouraging, and it's also with, so we're going to be looking in Estonia, Finland, and Sweden as the locations. So this project has enabled more of a Nordic, where we're including the Baltic states, which I said want to be included in the Nordics too, in some way. So that's one. So I think you have to really search for the opportunities. They don't come to you.
That's a good point.
I mean, you have to realize that Sweden is such a small country in the global, knowledge-producing network.
Yeah.
So we really need, and I think exactly like you're describing, the researcher, they see the best collaboration partner, they can identify that, and on aggregate, on some formal level, universities want to collaborate with other universities, but I mean, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And I have had research grants. I won't talk about from which university and grant giver, but I quite good grant, and I only hired one other Swede, and the rest was foreign participation. And it was like, oh, that's a little bit odd, because if you have this money, we would like to see some of your colleagues from other Swedes and give them research time. And now the other people at the institutions did not benefit. So I was kind of a little bit, not criticized, but why did you, a little bit questioned, and that's the difference. So one thing is for the best for the research project, the best for the institution might be something different, because then you want to invite other research.
Sure.
So it's
and then the funding body.
So it's
I think it's really one of the things I struggle with is that, I mean, sitting in different discussions where I hear the question, why should we in Sweden educate foreigners in the PhD program? Because they're probably just going to leave anyway, and so all our tax money goes into educating someone from another country who then leaves Sweden. Is that a good thing? Maybe we should think differently about that. And I think, whoa, wait a minute. Do you know anything about networks and social networking and knowledge creation? And who's to say that, as that maybe the PhD student should stay in Sweden, would want to stay in Sweden, then you build that. Or even if they leave, they take their network with them. And this is where I think there is this, we need to work harder on creating an understanding and awareness of the importance of these informal networks as well.
I mean, but again, going back to being an attractive place to stay or to return to when you're done as a PhD. And I mean, industry is important for that respect. I mean, not everyone can stay at the universities forever. We need to collaborate with the industries. And that leads us also to the question of again, this industry-university nexus. Is Sweden today well equipped for people, moving back and forth between universities and industry, or government offices for that sense? And we are examples of that, but is that really rewarded, or do you have to make that effort yourself? And how do that affect both what we do at universities, but also the competitiveness of our companies?
There's a lot of questions. I can just say I think it is something that individuals do personally, and it's more like if you want to make it happen, you will. And I think we should encourage it much more. I just side note is I sit on the Productivity Commission for Sweden's government, and we're finalizing our big set of recommendations for the government, and one of them was about encouraging the implementation of professor of practice, like you have at Stanford and so on. So to encourage that type of collaboration. So hopefully that will be picked up. But I think also we need to encourage more of academics being entrepreneurs and having a foot in both. I try to balance between what I'm doing as an entrepreneur and with my research. I try to create the phenomenon, go out there, start companies so that I can enable research to be done on this phenomenon. But this is a very untraditional way of doing things, and it challenges the norms, and I think we need to encourage more exploration of new forms of industry, academia collaboration, and have more test beds and pilots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I guess it varies across different, in nature science and economics and so on.
Yeah.
But at least in economics, I think we are a little bit odd people because we have been moving between academia and governmental agencies and so on. And it's just speaking for myself, my journey is unusual because I have worked, jumped between academia and governmental agencies and so on. But I think it became easier once you became a professor.
Yes.
Then you don't have to chase these titles anymore, and then the worlds kind of open up. But when you're that old, people don't move that much.
No.
So I think we have a challenge here to encourage this movement. But it's goddamn hard, I must say, because when you leave research or the academics world and try to come back, it evolves all the time. So you have to work twice as hard to stay fit in both.
Or even asking for a leave of absence to do such things is very difficult.
I mean, returning from Asia after almost 2 decades. I mean, the first question is, who are you?
Yeah. Never heard of you before.
Exactly.
And what were you doing over there, by the way?
Shouldn't tell you. He knows. He joined in a few times. No, but I mean, that's I think is that typical Swedish that we do not really encourage that for whatever reason.
I don't know if it's Swedish or it's just our profession in general, I would say. I think it's more that it's, we've built up these nice institutions and we have these boundaries and, now we're in an era where we need to think about how can we enable much more boundary spanning and this, nice kind of ecosystem and collaboration across.
Going back a little bit to the fantastic data that we have now in our hands, and we're receiving more data. What interesting things are we going to do, Patrick? I've made you head of research, so you give the orders, and I follow them.
But one question that we will actually look at what you're kind of indicating: are we promoting international collaboration enough?
Yeah.
And that's one question that we would like to have a closer look at.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but what's the optimal or ultimate question?
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, you should be careful about
But a very interesting question is, if you have this international collaboration, is that those research projects more successful than others?
So what?
And when we had a research project, what's the most boring part? It's at the end of the project to write a report of what everything you have produced. And hopefully we can get those as well, and then we can see this degree of collaboration.
So we will be able to answer all these nitty-gritty questions, and please feel free to join us when you have ideas here.
I would love to participate in this. Super
that's
interesting.
in the pipe, at least within this project, to have a look at.
And
I mean, no one has looked at it before.
Exactly.
But I think, I was part of a project with a company called Avedas where we were looking at all the FP5 and FP6 projects from like the 90s to the beginning of the early 2000s. And one of the dependent variables was, did the researchers in these projects or the industries, did they continue to collaborate afterwards? So while the project might not have achieved its results, did they continue to? And I think this is also another performance criterion, which is very important. So just to, throw that out.
I forgot my question, my content.
I'm sorry, I'm very bad at interrupting.
But the important thing is, I'm getting to it, is that as we continue to explore our data, which will be fantastic, we'll have many interesting, fun events here. But the important thing, what do we expect a university like Chalmers, for example, to learn from that, to gain from that?
That's a tricky question.
I know.
But I mean, at least you can see on black and white, we have this
Yes.
intention of promoting international collaboration, but what does data really say? Are we doing that? And are the research grantors, are they promoting this? So we can see,
So what you're saying is that there are quite a few myths
I mean,
out there.
Yes.
Which
when
we
the
might
rubber
be able
hits the
to-
road, that's
Exactly.
when the truth comes
Yeah.
through, and we
uh,
will, at least add some clarity to that question.
And you can't make a really difference if you don't have anything, you need that measurement. You need to
well,
have
you need some
something
empirical
to,
evidence to.
If we're
to-
talking about
to
organizational change, right? That's one of the most important things is to
One,
actually
one of
yeah.
the most cited papers in economics is called The Tyranny of Numbers.
Or just ran 1 million regressions.
Well, I think we just have to understand which numbers, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
So, very interesting.
So, is there anything really urgent? I ask you, Robin, if you were to lift one question of particular urgency in relation to what we have discussed, what would that be?
Oh, there's so many. But I think one of the most important things gets back to academic leadership and understanding, motivating, rewarding, and enabling researchers to make the right decision in international collaborations. That really is something that is expected, but not only within your field necessarily, but some type of interdisciplinary, I think, is also becoming extremely important. But that it's related to not some niche thing, but really has some form of impact.
Well, leadership, enabling, encouragement, impact.
And I think we should
right.
not live in the past, because
Yeah.
I think we have
Yes.
we think we're doing very well in Sweden, that we're competitive and hold this, we well-educated workforce, and we are doing well. But when we look at the actual TRF numbers, we see that we are falling back all the time,
Yeah.
but we are not really fully aware of that. So
If you look
We're
at
not-
AI, we're really falling down.
We're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
fully
very
aware
quickly.
of
Yeah.
the particular what's going on, but also why is it happening?
Yeah.
And we need to know that and be a little bit brave, I guess, and dare to make a great leap forward to cite a certain
Yeah.
leader a long time ago.
sometimes we're not always bringing the best of news.
No, but the worst of news can have good outcomes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And you, what's your?
Oh, mine.
Yes, you can't just ask us.
No, I'm quite positive, I have to say, because all of us, we have quite a bit of international experience. We have experience from, in and out from government offices, business society, academia, and we have identified these issues for good and bad. And on the positive side, I do believe that the research that we are going to do with the fantastic data, and which is materialized by the funding of STINT, not the least, is that we can actually provide, if not exact answers, we can provide some empirical evidence that directs universities and businesses and government policy in the right direction. If we can do that, I'm quite positive that we will receive or achieve exactly what the two of you were talking about, encouragement, leadership, and then Sweden have all the potential to take off and take the lead, but we cannot do it alone, right?
No, that was good.
Yeah. So, by having said that, let's stay positive.
Oh yeah, we have
Oh.
to.
And,
There's nothing else to be. We have to.
We are here.
Yes.
yeah, and
No,
and
we have so much. There's so much going for us. We have so much potential.
exactly.
But it's about really, enabling others to see that potential and taking those opportunities.
Just one more
Yeah.
thing on that note, and we talk about the research and collaborations. Sometimes we tend to forget the most important component of it all, and it's the students that we have, right? And this time of the year, it's so fantastic to see the students when they do their bachelor theses, their master theses, and with the effort they put into it,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
the forward-looking horizon they have, you know, gonna go out there and make a good job and you know, make a career. So what we're talking about in terms of research, international collaboration, in the end, it needs to feed back to our education to train our students so that they can become professionals and add and bring value. And you know, we cannot forget the students. They are the most important factors we have, perhaps, in the long run.
I totally agree, but there I think we also need to be much better at enabling new forms of learning, as we're being challenged a lot these
Yeah.
days by all the new AI tools out there. So I think we as institutions need to be much better at encouraging the students to learn and not only think about getting grades and a diploma.
Exactly.
That we need to rethink how we are teaching, and there's a lot of universities that are really pushing this, and I think that's something that we need to explore much more as well. So
Yeah.
Have you ever heard about pen and paper?
and
excellent tool.
reading a book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, I'm quite satisfied.
Yeah.
I'm very satisfied with today's discussion.
It's
I'm
excellent.
so
Thank
happy that, in particular, the two of you could join.
you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
And we have known each other for a long time, and not so long.
Not so
but
long.
we hope it will continue for
Yes. For a long time to come. Yes.
exactly. And again, thank you to everyone who have listened to us and been patient. Follow us on Crosstalks LinkedIn page and comment, ask questions, join us in the discussion, and we'll bring this forward. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you, Patrick
Thanks.
and Robin.
Thanks.
Thanks. Yay. Thank you. Yay.
All right.
Woohoo.
Yes.